जय श्री कृष्ण चैतन्य प्रभु नित्यानंद श्री अद्वैत गदाधर श्रीवासदि गौर भक्तवृंद जय श्री Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Nanda's appearance day coming up very soon. And Rochitani's appearance day coming up soon. It never hurts to chant their names. Nitai Gauranga, Nitai Gauranga.
Hare Krishna. So next week is a very auspicious, we have two very special days. On Friday is the appearance day of Advaita Acharya, and then on Sunday is Bhishmastami, the day that Bhishma Dev passed away. And if you look at this picture on the back wall on the top, you'll see this grandfather Bhishma Dev surrounded by Krishna and the Pandavas, these warriors, laying on a bed of arrows. It's a very glorious moment. And next week is Bhishmastami. And for those who know Mahabharata, we know on the 10th day is when Bhishma fell. He was actually unconquerable. No one could defeat him. He actually had to let Yudhishthira and the Pandavas, he said, "This is how you can kill me." Imagine like a warrior that, "I'm going to let you know how you can kill me." This is the stance that Bhishma was. Incredible warrior, defeated Parshuram, powerful personality. So I'm not going to go too much into his bio, because next Sunday I asked Bala Prabhu if he can share a little bit more about the life and teachings and a little biography of Bhishma Dev, and I'm sure he's going to weave in Advaita Acharya, another significant personality. In fact, it's because of Advaita Acharya that Krishna, in the form of Lord Chaitanya, came. Just like we were calling out earlier, Hare Krishna mantra, Govinda, Gauranga. So Advaita Acharya would be worshipping his Shalagram Shila and praying, "Krishna, please come, this age of Kali Yuga. It's an insurmountable ocean of vices and confusion and depression and darkness, and only you can help bring a process." So he was calling out and inviting Krishna in the form of Lord Chaitanya to come. So just a little preview, and next week, Krishna willing, Bala will elaborate on these two wonderful personalities. So today, one thing I'd like to just share is this practice in the Bhakti Yoga system called Vandanam, which is called prayer. And when we see people in a mood of prayer or in a gesture of prayer, there's a certain expression of vulnerability, of calling out, maybe sometimes even the heart is crying. And when you're gifted with certain opulences like strength and beauty and fame and knowledge and high position, most of the time you're thinking, "I've accomplished this." I was listening to a talk earlier. Srila Prabhupada says, when scientists make great discoveries, they say, "We are scientists, it's us. Because of us, this is happening." And then when there's some earthquake or tsunami or tornado, or their life is threatened, they're saying, "Oh God, help me." "Oh God, help me." So, especially when personalities are gifted with incredible opulences, to see them express and be in a situation of vulnerability, to open their hearts up to the Lord in such an intimate, personal, vulnerable way, it's a very beautiful combination. Just like some of you may have certain interests in athletics or movies, I don't know, cricket, or depending, right? Soccer. I grew up playing soccer. Some of you from India may grew up playing cricket, or actors and actresses, or famous music bands, or politicians, or philosophers. Let's say if you're into martial arts or something, if Mike Tyson went on an interview and started quoting Bhagavad Gita and was expressing this incredible transformation, which from some I've heard he's been delving into some ancient wisdom cultures. Or if some famous actor or actress or musician, right? If some of Stevie Wonder, back in the 70s, he heard the Maha Mantra and he met Agni Dev, one of Prabhupada's disciples, and he wanted the Maha Mantra on his album, Songs in the Key of Life, Pastime Paradise. And for those who are fans of Stevie Wonder, would be like, "Wow, Stevie's singing, he's got the Maha Mantra in one of his songs." Or from the Eurythmics, there's like Annie Lennox and Chrissy Hines, and a few of these musicians some of us might know from the 80s. And we're excited when we see a video of theirs and there's a picture of hey, look at Chrissy Hines had a picture of Jagannath in her music video from The Pretenders or something. That was back in the 80s. But anyways, up to now, there's even musicians like, I've heard this band called Tool, and how the lead singer is quite a philosopher. Or I went to high school, one of my friends back then, Zach De La Roca from Rage Against the Machine, and he got into social political activist music. And so these persons start to get a big name, whether in the field of sports, or I grew up playing soccer, so let's say someone like Messi or Ronaldinho walked in here and said, I'm interested in Bhagavad Gita, it's really been touching my heart. If you were a soccer player, you'd be like, wow, he's coming in, or some famous actor or actress. Yeah, so we're fascinated by that, right? when Bruce Lee speaks some words of wisdom or something, or a famous, musician. So all of us have some kind of psycho-cultural, athletic, musical, occupational interest. And there's certain persons in our field of interest or in our field of appreciation that hold an extremely high position. And when those persons express some appreciation for spirituality, what to say of Bhakti or Krishna or Bhagavad Gita, it's like, wow, that person quoted the Bhagavad Gita. And it enlivens us, and it kind of even reassures us, like, wow, they're into the Bhagavad Gita, or they're into yoga, or they're into meditation. That's amazing. So in our Bhakti tradition, we have what's called the Mahajanas, these great personalities. And it's described that Dharma can't be found just by arguing and debating and even just researching scripture with our own intellectual prowess. The path of Dharma won't be revealed that way. But where is it found? Dharmasya tattvam nihitam guhayam. Guhayam means hidden. Where is that Dharma? Where is that Dharmasya hi tattvam nihitam guhayam? Mahajano yena gatasa pantaha. It's hidden in the hearts of these great souls, of these Mahatmas, of these Mahajans. And it does one well, pantaha, to follow in their footsteps. So today I'd just like to read a few of the prayers from Bhishma Dev. Next week we'll hear more about his life. But it's a very beautiful moment. Bhishma Dev he was considered the most powerful warrior existing at that time. And there was a few of them who were definitely in the top 10. And they were called Maharatis or Atiratis. They could fight 1,000, some of them could fight 10,000, and some of them could fight 16,000 other warriors of their equal level. So just, if you wrestle someone at your own level, it's a pretty good workout, right? In boxing matches or UFC, usually it's 1-on-1. Can you imagine 1-on-3 or 1-on-10? And then times that by 1,000, 10,000. So these warriors were incredibly divinely empowered. And physiologically, they were huge, powerful. You hear of Bhima carrying his 4 brothers and his mother and Draupadi. You hear him carrying them. Imagine carrying all your family members on a hike over the Rockies. It's just, their strength was so immeasurable and so powerful. So their physique, their beauty, and most of all, what we remember them of is that they were rishis. The word rishi means sage. So today, it's so rare that a politician, an administrator, a prime minister, or anyone in some position where there's fame and prestige and power is exemplifying a lifestyle of a rishi, or which means a sage. Not just only someone who's philosophical, but is living by the principles of saintly behavior and saintly character. And this is how we remember these incredible personalities. Although their physical strength, their beauty, their administrative power, all that is in itself earns them fame and recognition and appreciation. But even higher than that is that they were rishis. They were kings, but they were sages. And in their prayers, we can really see, like, what are these great personalities? What's in their heart, right? Such a powerful person. Normally, if we have these kind of opulences of fame, beauty, prestige, knowledge, it's very difficult to just express oneself like, I'm just a humble servant, or the Lord is great, I'm just his, humble servant. And to express this sort of dainya, this humility, this sharanagati, this path of surrender. Surrender? Hey, I'm number one, right? I don't need to surrender. I am the one. Surrender to me. So easily Bhishma and these personalities, they had that kind of prowess where they were number one on many levels. But in their hearts, they knew that actually, I'm not number one. That Krishna is number one, God is number one, and I'm his servant. Servant of the servant of the servant. And this is the beauty of how they show us how they live their lives and how they left this world. Krishna says in Bhagavad Gita, Yam yam vapi smaram bhavam tyajati ante kalevaram tam tam evaiti kunteya sadatar bhavabhavitaha. So whatever state of being one is in at the time of death, that state they will attain. So therefore, these great personalities, although they're overseeing so much responsibility in this world, just like professional athletes, musicians, actors, actresses, philosophers, engineers, business persons, doctors, they're dedicating so much life to their practices, just like these great saintly kings. But most of all, every day, they were fully absorbed in service and vandanam and prayer. And therefore they knew that by this act, then at the time of death, I'll be transferred to the spiritual realm. And even at that ending of their life, they retire timely. There's a whole chapter in the Bhagavatam called the Pandavas Retire Timely. Even though they were able to, they were the number one swordsmen, right? Nakula and Sahadev, and Yudhishthir was the number one in the world at fighting with a spear. Arjuna was with his Gandiva. Actually, he was excellent at many, many weapons. And Bhima, we know, with the club. But at the end, they actually gave it all up. They weren't attached. They weren't at the end of their life thinking, I need to still impress people with my weaponry, and I need to still build up my testosterone so I can attract people and experience romance. They were kind of been there, done that, in my teens and 20s. And now in their elderly, in their wisdom years, they're now preparing to leave the world. And before they leave the world, they leave an incredible contribution of wisdom culture. And so one such personality is Bhishma Dev. And so it's just about 7-8 minutes. We'll read his beautiful prayers. In the Srimad Bhagavatam, it's full of these prayers from these great personalities. And it's not that, these kind of people, they're praying because they're kind of weak, or they're confused, or they're desperate, or they need some money, or they need a good grade, or they're trying to get to another country and get a green card, or they're trying to get a nice spouse. That's why they're praying. They're just praying because for something superficial, a temporary benefit. But throughout the Bhagavatam, there's no personality in the Srimad Bhagavatam. There's no Kaitava Dharma. In fact, Bhishma, when the sun went into Makara Sakranti, when it started traveling into the north, then he established the highest principles of Dharma. He was teaching everything from just kind of humanitarian, social, even just functioning of duties of kings and the different castes and things like that. But then most of all, he closed with his prayers. So right in that moment, when the sun was traveling to the north, he spoke on Dharma. So throughout the Bhagavatam, you won't hear prayers for anything mundane or anything superficial. You're going to hear prayers based on genuine Shuddha Bhakti, pure devotion of the heart. And so being that it was also Makara Sakranti last week, it's when the sun travels into Capricorn, that's when actually Bhishma started to speak these Dharma talks and going into his prayers as well. So it's an auspicious time to hear about Bhishma during this time. So Canto 1, Chapter 9, and we're going to start right around text 29. So we'll recite Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Take a nice deep inhalation. Please repeat, or let's say together since you just took the inhalation. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. So let us relish and appreciate these beautiful prayers by Bhishma Dev. Okay. While Bhishma Dev was describing occupational duties, so just one other note. He's lying on a bed of arrows. So I don't think anyone here, if we have a little splinter in our pinky, it would be difficult to remember a verse from the Bhagavad Gita. It'd be easy to remember a few four-letter words, but it'd be difficult to remember. I was thinking of ouch. But there's a few other ones when we're in pain. But we could hardly even remember a verse. Bhishma Dev, his whole body is full of arrows. And he's such a great personality that it was Krishna's arrangement. He saw it this way. It was Krishna's arrangement that this great personality, at the point of leaving, didn't even touch the ground. That's how glorious he was. He was above the ground. He was a little thirsty. Arjuna shot an arrow into the ground. Some water came up, and then he created a pillow for him with his arrows. But such a glorious personality, he was off the ground on a bed of arrows. And so this is the site. This is the historical site of Bhishma Dev. And he's surrounded by the Pandavas and his worshipable Lord Krishna. While Bhishma Dev was describing occupational duties, the sun's course ran into the northern hemisphere. This period is desired by mystics who die at their will. Thereupon, that man who spoke on different subjects with thousands of meanings and who fought on thousands of battlefields and protected thousands of men stopped speaking and, being completely freed from all bondage, withdrew his mind from everything else and fixed his wide open eyes upon the original personality of Godhead, Sri Krishna, who stood before him, four-handed, dressed in yellow garments that glittered and shined. By pure meditation, dharanaya, pure meditation, looking at Lord Sri Krishna, he at once was freed from all material inauspiciousness and was relieved of all bodily pains caused by the arrow wounds. Thus all the external activities of his senses at once stopped, and he prayed transcendentally to the controller of all living beings while quitting his material body. Bhishma Devi said, "Let me now invest my thinking, feeling, and willing, which were so long engaged in different subjects and occupational duties, in the all-powerful Lord Sri Krishna. He is always self-satisfied, but sometimes, being the leader of the devotees, he enjoys transcendental pleasure by descending on the material world, although from him only the material world is created. Sri Krishna is the intimate friend of Arjuna. He's appeared on this earth in his transcendental body, which resembles the bluish color of the tamal tree. His body attracts everyone in the three planetary systems, upper, middle, and lower. May his glittering yellow dress and his lotus face, covered with paintings of sandalwood pulp, be the object of my attraction, and may I not desire fruitive results." On the battlefield, where Sri Krishna attended Arjuna out of friendship, the flowing hair of Lord Krishna turned ashen due to the dust raised by the hoofs of the horses. And because of his labor, beads of sweat wetted his face. All these decorations, intensified by the wounds dealt by my arrows, were enjoyed by him. Let my mind thus go on to Sri Krishna. In obedience to the command of his friend, Lord Sri Krishna entered the arena of the battlefield of Kurukshetra between the soldiers of Arjuna and Duryodhana. And while there, he shortened the lifespans of the opposite party by his merciful glance. This was done simply by his looking at the enemy. Let my mind be fixed upon that Krishna. When Arjuna was seemingly polluted by ignorance upon observing the soldiers and commanders before him on the battlefield, the Lord eradicated his ignorance by delivering transcendental knowledge. May his lotus feet always remain the object of my attraction. Fulfilling my desire and sacrificing his own promise, he got down from the chariot, took up its wheel, and ran towards me hurriedly, just as a lion goes to kill an elephant. He even dropped his outer garment on the way. So Bhishma Dev has this chivalrous rasa, this relationship with Krishna in chivalry. So Srila Prabhupada says, to the mundane, materialistic view, yes, Krishna is sweating, Bhishma pierced him, so-called blood is coming out. And this is just to bewilder the materialistic atheists who think, oh, just see, Krishna is just a mundane mortal. But Bhishma Dev, the greatest of the great of Mahajans, right, understood this is Krishna's pastime. His body is Satchidananda, fully eternal, full of knowledge and bliss. He has nothing to do with the material transactions as we experience in this material world. And yet, he comes in this way to have this beautiful reciprocation with Bhishma in this chivalrous ras that Krishna is enjoying with Bhishma, fighting as warriors. Equally as when he is dancing with the gopis or running through the fields with his cowherd boyfriends. That same love and reciprocation is being experienced between Lord Krishna and Bhishma Dev, this valiant warrior. May he, Lord Sri Krishna, the personality of Godhead, who awards salvation, be my ultimate destination. On the battlefield, he charged me as if angry because of the wounds dealt by my sharp arrows. His shield was scattered and his body was smeared with blood due to the wounds. At the moment of death, let my ultimate attraction be to Sri Krishna, the personality of Godhead. I concentrate my mind upon the chariot driver of Arjuna, who stood with a whip in his right hand and a bridle rope in his left, who was very careful to give protection to Arjuna's chariot by all means. Those who saw him on the battlefield of Kurukshetra attained the original forms after death. Let my mind be fixed upon Lord Sri Krishna, whose motions and smiles of love attracted the damsels of Brajadam, the gopis. The damsels imitated the characteristic movements of the Lord after his disappearance from the rasa dance. At the Rajasuya Yagya sacrifice, which is this incredible ceremony performed by Maharaj Yudhishthira, the lead brother of the five warriors, there was the greatest assembly of all the elite men of the world, the royal and learned orders, and in that great assembly, Lord Sri Krishna was worshipped by one and all as the most exalted personality of Godhead. This happened during my presence, and I remembered the incident in order to keep my mind upon the Lord. Now I can meditate with full concentration upon that one Lord, Sri Krishna, now present before me, because now I have transcended the misconceptions of duality in regard to his presence in everyone's heart, even in the hearts of the mental speculators. He is in everyone's heart. The sun may be perceived differently, but the sun is one. Sutta Goswami said, thus Bhishmadev merged himself in the Supersoul, Lord Sri Krishna, the Supreme Personality of Godhead, with his mind, speech, sight, and action, and thus he became silent and his breathing stopped. Knowing that Bhishmadev had merged into the unlimited eternity of the Supreme Absolute, all present there became silent like birds at the end of the day. It's a very beautiful section here. I'm just going to close with this purport. Therefore, both men and demigods sounded drums in honor, and the honest royal order commenced demonstrations of honor and respect. From the sky fell showers of flowers. O descendant of Bhrigu Shaunaka, after performing funeral rituals for the dead body of Bhishmadev, Maharaj Yudhishthira was momentarily overtaken with grief. All the great sages then glorified Lord Sri Krishna, who was present there by confidential Vedic hymns. Then all of them returned to respective hermitages, bearing always Lord Krishna within their hearts. Thereafter Maharaj Yudhishthira at once went to his capital, Hastinapur, accompanied by Lord Sri Krishna, and there he consoled his uncle and aunt Gandhari, who was an ascetic. After this, the great religious king Maharaj Yudhishthira executed the royal power in the kingdom strictly according to the codes and royal principles approved by his uncle and confirmed by Lord Krishna. So just this one verse here. Knowing that Bhishmadev had merged into the unlimited eternity of the Supreme Absolute, all present there became silent like birds at the end of the day. Srila Prabhupada says, the purports are like frosting. There's already a nice cake, and then you add frosting to it. It just becomes sweeter, or like it's described when a parrot bites into a mango, that mango even becomes sweeter. So we have these beautiful verses of the Bhagavatam, the Amala Puranam, which is nectar, and even more nectar is the commentaries by the Acharyas. And we have all these great masters, and then Srila Prabhupada took those and then gave these Bhaktivedanta purports, which are like nectar, nectar, nectar. So Srila Prabhupada says, to enter into or to become merged into the unlimited eternity of the Supreme Absolute means to enter the original home of the living being. Isn't that nice? When you think, I'm just going to merge into something, you just kind of amalgamate and it just becomes this like mush. But here Srila Prabhupada is saying, what does this merging into the unlimited eternity look like? It means to enter into the original home of the living being. So we're all looking for home comfort. The living beings are all component parts and parcels of the absolute personality of Godhead, and therefore they are eternally related with him as a servitor and the served. The Lord is served by all his parts and parcels, as a complete machine is served by its parts and parcels. Any part of the machine removed from the whole is no longer important. Similarly, any part and parcel of the absolute detached from the service of the Lord is useless. The living beings who are in the material world are all disintegrated parts and parcels of the Supreme Whole, and they are no longer as important as the original parts and parcels. There are, however, more integrated living beings who are eternally liberated. The material energy of the Lord, called Durga Shakti, or the superintendent of the prison house, takes charge of the disintegrated parts and parcels and thus they undergo a conditioned life under the laws of material nature. When the living being becomes conscious of this fact, he tries to go back home, back to Godhead, and thus the spiritual urge of the living being begins. So, this is such a beautiful pastime of Bhishma Dev. And I know for myself, and maybe some of you feel, when you read Srimad Bhagavatam or spiritual scriptures, it may seem very lofty. And almost like, how can this be? He's praying to Krishna, he's a color of a tamal tree, wearing golden cloth, and his hair is flowing, he's playing a flute. This just seems way too out there. I'm just gonna practice some yama, niyama, asana, pranayam, I'll do some pratyahar. Maybe I'll get to dharana, which many don't. Dhyan, very rare. And what to say, samadhi, 1 in a million can actually get to that point and stick with it. And here's a personality who's expressing prayers that on the platform of pratyahar, dharana, dhyan, and samadhi, all through vandanam, all through this limb of bhakti of prayer, Bhishma Dev, and he's in shavasana. He's in shavasana and he's fully in samadhi. And how does that look? If you try to practice the 8 limbs, technically, we don't even have enough years. 100 years is not even enough. Normally in previous ages, the sages would live up to 60,000 years to master the Ashtanga system, to master it. Here Bhishma Dev, lying in a bed of arrows, through vandanam, through pouring out his heart, just relishing the darshan of Krishna. He's laying down and his eyes are wide open and just having this darshan of Krishna describing his beauty. And we might say, for ourselves, that sounds a little too fanciful and sentimental. But Bhishma Dev, so you can just you can picture it in this way. Of all the people who have prestige in this world in the field of sports, like the topmost athletes, the topmost actors and actresses, the topmost newscasters, politicians, prime ministers, queens and kings, philosophers, academicians, doctors, engineers, business persons, in every vocation that there is, if the highest of the high all came together and just say, let's chant Hare Krishna and really relish the darshan, the vision, the beauty of Krishna, we'd be like, well, if they're expressing such devotion, then maybe there's something to it. If all these persons on the highest caliber of all human accomplishments are vulnerably expressing their gratitude and appreciation of bhakti. So now you take Bhishma and multiply all those personalities by thousands and thousands and thousands. The caliber of this personality, Bhishma Dev. Next week you'll hear more. The type of vow he took, his contribution to society, just how endearing he was to the Pandavas and the world at large. So when a personality or personalities like that are glorifying, then it's like, well, I don't have so much shraddha. My faith isn't so strong. But if these personalities, these acharyas, these mahatmas, then let me give it a try. Let me give a try of what they're doing. And one way to absorb ourselves in that yoga system is by hearing these beautiful prayers and kind of entering into the spirit of these mahajanas. And it'll take us so deep into our bhakti practice. We may not feel so much in our heart, but we can read the prayers of these great souls. I don't know, name a person that you admire maybe in athletics or music. Is there someone out there? I don't know, maybe back in the day. What's that? LeBron James. Okay, is that a big basketball player, right? Yeah, so what about if he came in and he's like, I just read the Bhagavad Gita and it's just so amazing and I just love Krishna. And before every game now, I just spend a little moment and I pray to Krishna and I know that he's actually the one that's empowering me. And you hear him say, Ananyas chintayanto mam yejanu paryas pasate. Or you hear, Krishna says, always think of me. So before the game and after game and even during the game, I think of Krishna. And that's where my empowerment comes from. If you were a basketball player, you're a 9-year-old and you're looking and you'd be like, maybe I'll recite those prayers too. I'll recite those verses. If he's doing it, I'll recite them, right? Or whoever else it might be. So what to say of Bhishma, like I said, thousands of times multiplied as far as his caliber and personality. So during this time especially, it's still, the sun has gone to the north. Bhishma Dev is lying on the bed of arrows. On the 28th is when he passes. If you have Srimad Bhagavatam, take a little time, open to the 9th chapter, the 1st canto, and relish this whole chapter. There's so many beautiful instructions about Dharma. And if you're into yoga and you're into the system of yoga, you can experience samadhi just by hearing these prayers of Bhishma Dev. If you try to get to samadhi through the rigid Ashtanga system, it's very complicated. You'll get frustrated. Your mind will go elsewhere. Just to get to yamas, we're not so significant. No, even the greatest of Mahajanas, even the greatest of yogis, even these Mahayogis like Bhishma Dev, their expression of samadhi is through these beautiful prayers and glorifying Krishna in such an intimate, personal way, even to the point of just Bhishma as a warrior relishing the blood from his arrows. He goes, "Oh, I shot him with those arrows." And there's this blood coming out. And then the materialists are just thinking, "Oh, this just looks mundane. Krishna's just a normal human." But Bhishma is seeing, my supreme Lord, my lovable, supreme worshipable Lord Krishna is coming in this form and allowing me to have this reciprocation with him in this devotional, loving reciprocation with him, even with arrows. So very, very sweet and very heartfelt. So please pick up a Bhagavatam. I don't think it's in just the first, I think the first canto goes to chapter 8. So you'll have to get a set. It's 12 cantos. And I tell you, you won't regret it. There's 12 cantos. I just talked to my friend. He's visiting from North Carolina. He's snowboarding in Beaver Creek. And he says, if you don't have a pass, it costs about $200 to spend a day skiing in Beaver Creek. About $200 if you're an adult, including everything. Getting there, buying the pass, and maybe, having a little place to stay and some meals. So just for about that cost, you can have a whole set of Bhagavatams. And as skiing does have a rush, but you come down. At the end of the day, if you don't have a sprained wrist or an ankle, the day ends. Srimad Bhagavatam is like skiing that never stops. And not just for the body, but for the soul, right? It's that flow. It's just that flow, that current, being in the best powder of bhakti. So dive into it, dive into this ocean. And then next week, you'll hear some more glories of Bhishma Dev and Advaitacharya. Bala will share, and that much more you'll feel, just like you were saying, this LeBron, this basketball player. If you're a basketball fan, the more you hear about him, and it's like, wow, it's just, what an amazing, he trains this much, he did this when he was young, and he practiced this many hours a day, and now he's this, influential and successful. So next week we'll hear more about Bhishma Dev and Advaitacharya, and we'll see if our hearts are inspired, like, I want to learn more about Bhishma Dev. I want to follow in his footsteps. I want to even learn some of those prayers that he recites. Just like that little kid, if the professional basketball player recited, Man mana bhavamad bhakto, yada yada hidharmasya, you'd be like, I'm going to learn those verses. If that guy's learning those verses, I'm going to learn those verses. So Bhishma Dev, oh, he's saying those verses? Let me learn one or two of them. And then this is samadhi. This is bhakti. So thank you very much. All glories to Bhishma Dev. All glories to Srimad Bhagavatam. And most especially all glories to Srila Prabhupada, who has welcomed us to enter into glorifying these Mahajans. If it wasn't for Srila Prabhupada, who's right up there with these Mahajanas, who introduced us to these great personalities, we wouldn't be here. So it's always an opportunity to take a moment to express our gratitude to Srila Prabhupada, who brought us to Srimad Bhagavatam and brought this all around the world during the time that he was here. Srila Prabhupada ki jai, Harinam Sankirtan ki jai, Gauda Premanandi. Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Shri Vasadi Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Mahamantra ki Jai, Harinam Sankirtan Yagya ki Jai, Prabhupada ki I go with praise.